development versus web development versus hybrid frameworks, and this will be explained in due time. We want to thank BMI for the pizza and the video. We've got free full-site monthly subscriptions cards for anybody that wants to claim them. And Google usually supplies us with Slack and ongoing support, so we thank them for that. In September, we had a Project Tango hackathon, which was a hackathon where we targeted developers towards a device called a Google device called a Project Tango. It has a few extra sensors on it, basically for the purpose of app perception. And we had 3 really cool app submissions at the end of the day. In the end of the day, the best one won. And, well, that was bad. It's I guess, subjective depending on who you want to say was the best, but that was deemed the best by our judgment criteria. And it was, I had a lot of fun that day. Just as number October 2nd through October 4th, Vanderbilt had a guy named Sam Campos and a couple other people at Vanderbilt organized Vandy Hacks, a weekend-long hackathon. I was there for the Friday and the Sunday, but not Saturday. I think you were there for Saturday. It was fun. I helped mentor a little bit up until like 4 a.m. on Friday, and then I had to go. Turned out Saturday was my birthday, and I forgot all about that. So my family had plans, I couldn't be there anyway. In the hackathon, the team that won the best Project Tango project was also the team that won the best project of the hackathon, and it was a really cool app. I can show you that if you want, or I can talk about it in the team that happened at the end of this meeting. Looking forward, in November, there's holidays right in November, so we're probably going to skip that. December, again, holidays that really preclude us from having an effective headcount. So January, we're talking about doing another Android study jam. And that's where basically we'll walk you through a series of lessons hosted on Udacity that will teach you to program Android from the ground up. Last year it was for experienced Java programmers, and I think the one they're putting out this year is going to be a more basic level. And we haven't committed to that yet, but it is definitely something we're looking at, so stay tuned. What is mobile app development? Mobile application development is the process by which application software is developed for handheld devices, such as personal digital assistants, enterprise digital assistants, or mobile phones. And that's what we all know and love as the things we solve the App Store. And you usually think of them as being native apps. However, if you look on Wikipedia, it also says these applications can be pre-installed on devices during manufacturing or delivered as web applications using server-side or client-side processing with JavaScript to provide application-like experience from a web browser. And with all that web browser integration, there comes some really handy tools that you can use to write an app. We're going to be talking about a couple of those today, including some frameworks. And we have some panelists here to help tell us about the different things that you can do with a mobile device. Unfortunately, not all of our panelists are here, but I think these guys are good enough. And
that's what they hear. That's what I heard.
And we're certainly going to have a lively discussion. I'm going to introduce one at a time and allow you to give your brief bio or whatever. For native development, we have Jonathan Wiley.
Hey, I'm Jonathan Wiley. I go by Wiley for those of you who know me. I run a native mobile shop in town called Lincoln, and we will be in Los Angeles.
Also on the native development team, Kurt Nelson.
Hi, I'm Kurt. I teach people how to write Android, and I also do backend, and I taught at a bunch of major tech companies teaching Android specifically.
And I should say, I'm really happy to get Kurt on the team because I came into knowing about him from a rant on Nashville's the Nash Dev Slack against non-native development. I thought, we need that guy there. So thank you for showing up. Team Native. Mario Scott, our mobile web development team, is not here. However, Kevin Cooper, please introduce yourself, and I'll try to find the other slide that has Mario's name on it.
Alright.
Kevin Cooper.
I'm Kevin Cooper. I'm a developer at Beacon Connect here in Nashville. Doing web application development. So, yeah, and if there's some news you and you're a web application developer, please talk to Nashville.
Beacon?
Yeah.
Christian's company?
Yeah. Beacon Connect. BKON. No.
Okay, and also did you got Henderson. Then you present yourself.
My name is Ben Henderson. I'm currently the new product manager for mobile at Linkit. Been doing that for 2 weeks. Just started there. Prior to that, I was a partner by Logic for 12 years. Started doing iOS work when the SDK first dropped. Did a little native Android work. Realized that my team was pretty small. Discovered Xamarin. Got into Xamarin development. So I've been developing and then kind of directing projects for 5-6 years, mobile projects for customers. We were a consulting company, so we got to work on a lot of projects for customers. So some to correct the vocabulary a little bit, Xamarin people would take big exception to the word native, and they would say their stack is native as well, and they tend to use the vocabulary like indigenous. If you're developing with Swift or Objective-C or Java, versus their stack.
We were just saying we don't need any qualifier, we're just mobile developers, like the original ones.
Ouch! Shots fired. You guys can argue that.
2 minutes or 1 man lead. Okay, so on to the cage match. I think right now I'll turn it over to Ed, and Ed's got the questions that he can pose to everybody. And I think hopefully you guys will see the questions. Unfortunately, Kevin, this can be a little bit surprised, but they're not that hard. They're just basically you can introduce yourself and talk about it. So take it, Ed.
All right, so we're going to start off with the native team over here on the first question. Second question, start with you, and we'll cycle around. So the first question tonight for the native team, this is a 4-minute question. It's simply an opening statement about the platform.
4-minute question? Is this a debate club?
Yes, sir. It certainly is.
Yeah.
You want to go?
What's the question for
It's actually based for both Android and for iOS. Why you would choose Android or iOS development native as opposed to developing a web app or developing something in a hybrid framework.
Don't take Android.
Okay. Yeah, so with Android, one reason to go native is you get access to all kinds of cool sensors. You get NFC, you get your full gyro, accelerometer. If you're running on a watch like Android Wear, you get access to accelerometers on that watch. Google Glass, for example, you could only write native apps for, and if you know native Android, you can just grab onto any of these new devices like Tango, for example, the second it comes out, and you don't have to wait on somebody somewhere to go rewrite the whole framework to work on any Android device.
Yeah, I guess with iOS development, I mean, if you want to build a sexy app, which I think we all do, right? You're going to want really nice animation, you're going to really polished UX, and so, I think developing native for iOS is the best way to do that. Get fitting animations, and they're super simple to put on there. If you need your custom volume, all that stuff, that's available to you. Apps are snappy, they're fast, they're responsive. I believe it provides a superior experience for those kind of micro interactions that we're doing with native devices. That's a pretty short intro.
Yeah, if you're running on a wearable and only have 5 seconds to use it, you don't want 5 of those seconds to be some JavaScript VM loading.
I mean, I guess we can also cover documentation, right? Like, with Android and iOS, you're using tools developed by these companies specifically for those platforms. They're very well documented. You can use the latest technologies. And, if you run into a problem, almost certainly someone solved that and posted code for you on Stack Overflow. So that's a really nice plus to have if you're, building out something new. There's so many things that you can build natively now, so many libraries that it's really great to have access to that wider community for some of these areas that you haven't done that.
Yeah, and if you already know Java and because of Android or C for iOS, it really only takes a week or two to kind of get it far enough to start getting going on building out a full app.
Yeah, let's not think about Swift for those of you who like your JavaScript style. Swift is another great addition. So. I'll get out the full 5 minutes.
You're good?
We're not even close. We're good.
Let's do it.
Shoot 40.
Take as long as you want. All right. Nice. The web team, same kind of question. Give us just an overview of the platform.
Okay. So the web has been around for longer than all these other platforms here. So just starting with that, there's a lot more, the points documentation and that sort of thing. You're not reinventing the development paradigm or anything like that. You're just resizing and reshaping it. As far as users, according to Business Insider, 65% of people downloaded 0 apps last month. 65%. That's not that much. Going even further, let's see here. So only 7% of people downloaded more than 5 apps in the past month. That's not the case with web. People are constantly visiting pages. They're constantly accessing that. Personally, that's the biggest killer in my head every month. Not downloading apps. It's browsing the web from. And the biggest argument for that a lot of people make is access to sensors and access to these major tools. But that's slowly but surely being eliminated. There's Google came out recently with Service Worker, which allows you to you push notifications and cache full websites locally on your machine, so you can visit these while you're offline, where you're not connected. They're also working on things like Bluetooth API. There's already things where you can get your location and things like that. So those are just no longer the case. The biggest thing, though, is that we are getting to the point where everything has some sort of mobile presence between, stores, between things like parking meters. That all over the place, you'll have some sort of mobile connectivity. And it just doesn't scale. You're only going to have so many apps, you're only going to have so much space on your phone. So we need something that's infinitely scalable like the web. And that's why I think that mobile web development is the way to go.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you very much. Hybrid team. Why not our
Why is a hybrid app? Why are you calling me the hybrid team?
Well, okay, frameworks versus there's something that distinguishes a mobile app from a web app from like a Xamarin or an Accelerator or Titanium or
I think if you're getting Titanium or what is the other one? The other open source web one? Cordova.
yeah.
You're getting a lot of, and I think that's evolved in that story. But used to be, I'm sure the Accelerator guy could set it straight. But it used to be you get a lot of functionality of running in a browser. You're running in a web view. You create a basic scrolling experience and you scroll and it jitters. The performance of those things were terrible, right? They used to be. Now they're not here to defend themselves, so we'll just assume that's how it is still. But Xamarin is not that. So to set the record straight, it's not a hybrid experience. I mean, it's nothing to say you could put a web view inside your app if that made sense architecturally for you. You wanted to leverage some web goodness inside your Xamarin app, you could do that. But it's not like hybrid out the box. What you get with a Xamarin product is, you get an IPA or an APK. You get a native app at the end of the day. There's going to be some compromises. I'm not sure if you'll notice it, but there is some overhead under the covers when you're working with Xamarin. So Xamarin is all about .NET, and with Xamarin you get all the you get to work with C#, you get to work with Visual Studio. They have their own editor called Xamarin Studio, but you get to work in either C# or F# if you like, and you write one language for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, but you are creating native apps. It's all based, the company itself is like 3 years old, but it's based upon some fairly old, robust technology. When .NET came out like 13, 14 years ago, it was a Microsoft product, kind of like countering Java, kind of like their answer to Java, where Java was trying to run everywhere. They wrote their platform in a runtime, but they only wrote it for one operating system, their own. And then some crazy people got together and wrote a runtime for Linux. And back then, 12, 13 years ago, like Linux wasn't nearly as strong in the enterprise as it is today. So it's like, what the heck are they doing that for? Well, fast forward to now, that investment that they made has paid off. Those guys, Nat Friedman and Miguel de Cata are the guys who created this runtime for Linux a long time ago. They got bought by Xerox. Xerox got bought by Attachmate, is that right? German company? Anyway, so along that timeline, they created Mono Touch, which I evaluated when I was doing, I'm going to say native. I don't care about the native indigenous stuff. When I was doing Objective-C based iOS, I looked at it and thought, you're crazy to jump on that bandwagon. It was C#, it was like bleeding edge, scary stuff. That was when Apple was shutting down Adobe for trying to do everything and creating crappy apps. It was a very scary time, so I didn't get into it then. But as the market matured and there was iOS had a huge market share, Android slowly caught up and then surpassed in terms of market share. My customers started asking for both, especially the customers I wanted to get asked for both. And that was a bit of a bind. So I'm like, what do my small shop do to promote my form?
You're getting close.
Just wrap it up. Yeah, so what can I do to maintain the skills inside my shop? And we got into mobile and got our first Macs, learned Objective-C, did all these things, but we really had .NET heritage. So when we bumped into the Xamarin guys at Microsoft Build up in Redmond in late 2012, and they showed to us that they had a product that could solve that problem, we got on it. So, they're a 3-year-old company that have really long heritage of doing this, and they have some really good tools. So, but it is native, to be clear. It's not a hybrid. So.
We were calling it hybrid because you were on a team with Accelerator and Titanium, and
this guy's a totally hybrid.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, now refer to you as Team Xamarin.
Perfect.
Yeah. Excellent. Team Xamarin.
Very good. Excellent. All right. Second question here, we're going to start with the mobile web team, and this is a chance for you to talk about some of the challenges and problems that you find in developing on the platform. It's a 3-minute question.
Okay. Challenge the problem. Okay. So some of the problems is not the lack of documentation, it's the fragmentation of that documentation. So because I'm going to be the politician here and have the good parts. Because there's such a low barrier to entry on web development, and there's a lot of people that start there and move to other things, there's a lot of people who are giving advice. People that have been doing it for half a year that want to get back, and so they start getting on the boards and giving advice, and it's not necessarily good advice. So I would say that's one of the biggest struggles is the fragmentation of it. But I would say many developers are merely expert Googlers, and so once you discover that what team's advice is and Stack Overflow is a great system.
Google, you mean you go beyond Stack Overflow?
Yeah. Well, I Google the first app.
Yes.
And so with that. let's see, any other barriers to entry, or not barriers to entry,
Some of your problems and challenges.
problems and challenges.
What's a pain to deal with in your methodology?
Well, again, a pain for the positive point. The fact that you don't know necessarily where the data is landing, so you need to be responsive about that. You need to build for dynamic sizing. So because you don't know that, you can't have. You need to think in that way. Which if you're someone who's sitting there at first counting pixels and thinking of it in a more physical space, and that's a paradigm that you have to get over.
Sure.
So I'm gonna end up.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Team Xamarin, please let us understand your plight.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's tons of rough stuff. I mean, for one thing, like native mobile development is hard. Mobile development is hard, period. I mean, you're in a very constrained device. You know, network is intermittent. So, first off, mobile development is hard. The native kind, where you're going through app stores and stuff. One of the biggest pains of a Xamarin developer is a thing called bindings. So, one of the great things about the communities that are out there for iOS and Android are they're going crazy, creating open source projects. That you could just download and use. CocoaPods is an awesome example of that kind of stuff. And third-party vendors, if they're going to create an SDK, they're going to create it for iOS and Android. Unless they're real big enterprise-facing customer, they probably won't create a Xamarin one out the box, So getting access to those SDKs is trouble. So Xamarin has a thing called bindings, where you can put this veneer over the top of the SDK and expose it to the C#, to the .NET platform. So that's kind of a pain. And when we went at Firefly, we did lots of binding projects directly for Xamarin or for their customers that would come to us. We kind of created kind of a competency around that. So you can solve that by going to GitHub. You can find things out there, but still they get stale. So that's kind of a pain. Xamarin is a young company. They have very agile mindset. So they will release early and often. So some of their products may have a few bugs in them, like the IDE. Sometimes Xamarin Studio, sometimes is a bit buggy. The core technology itself is pretty sound. Don't really have any like there, but some of their products they offer on top of it. They release pretty as soon as they can and get them out there and iterate, so that you can find bugs. And then our community isn't as large as the kind of indigenous communities. I mean, there are more people doing iOS and Android work. It's a smaller community, so we don't have a really robust kind of CocoaPods alternative. They tried to create their own, but it's not nearly as vibrant a community as the community at large. So there are compelling reasons to use Xamarin, but those are some of the drawbacks.
Very good. Thank you so much. Team Native?
Sure.
Same question.
Yeah. I mean, I guess everyone's thinking Team Native, and we'll continue to call ourselves that. I think. The big problem is that you got to write a separate app for every platform, right? Like that's a big deal, especially with the cost of data development these days. And I think there's something to that. I think there are ways to intelligently share your code between devices, and at a certain point you may want to rethink why you're building so much business logic into your native apps when maybe that should be on the server. But that's definitely a concern when building natively. Mobile web doesn't have this problem as much. I know Team Xamarin does, getting to that to review is always fun. At least on the iOS side, and Google started to back down a little bit. But that's definitely a bit of a challenge. And the other thing is finding developers who can jump between platforms. all of the developers at our shop, they know iOS and Android, but I think they're a fairly rare breed of people. We specifically picked them to learn both, but that's a lot of technologies are having to shut it here, doing all and stuff like that. So I would say those are some big challenges of doing native.
Yeah, definitely the hardest part of native is that you actually get to learn something new, which I enjoy, but that's definitely something that's a lot bigger for a lot of people. And also, there's a difference between learning how to do it and how to do it right. Because you're natively running on the bare metal almost, you have a lot more room to screw up. You have a lot more room to make huge performance mistakes, eat people's battery, eat your network up, just lock up and be janky. And learning how to do write Android app correctly so that rotation works, you don't leak memory, you don't waste your battery, you don't waste your data plan, all that definitely takes some effort and some planning out ahead of time, but as a whole, it's a fun experience, at least in my opinion, for learning things, so I enjoy that. And another pain point, it's way less of one than it used to be, is the whole fragmentation thing, especially on Android, where it used to be that you really seriously had to test your app on maybe 100+ devices before you would find bugs sometimes. It's getting a lot better. Samsung being reined in, and they're starting to behave now with Marshmallow. Google's putting a lot more restrictions on what you have to have done to be approved as an actual Android device versus an iOS device. That's definitely improving there. But then they're just bringing new whole types of device classes that we hadn't even seen before, which just keeps us on our toes.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. All right, Team Xamarin, we're going to start with you on this question. This is kind of a combo question from our spawn questions and some user-submitted questions. And it's, do you dabble in the other disciplines that we gentlemen represent? If so, how do you handle keeping everything straight with the amount of information that each platform requires you to know?
Yeah, well, I started off as an iOS developer, and that's how I cut my teeth. And that, when you do Xamarin work, you really have to know the indigenous, you have to know the platform of the stack you're targeting, really. I can talk about some newer stuff they're doing, but I don't think it's quite there yet. So, when you get your C# framework, you get classes that just map one-to-one. So you get a UI view controller. You get all the concepts of the native framework exist in Xamarin. They're exposed in C# classes. So it actually helps to have had some experience already on the platform. I don't do it so much anymore, but at Firefly we did, and we would kind of pick the engagement and make a technology decision at that time. So if a customer is like, there's no way, usually it's like they're keen on iOS, and there's like, for our demographic, there's just no way that we're ever going to develop an Android app, then 100% I'm going to go, Swift app, Swift Xcode app, because it's a hindrance. Once we got acquired, so actually there's a risk there, right? That your Xamarin team might go away. So that would have happened to them, and there are just tons of freelance, iOS and Android people around that can help the smaller companies. But to your question, I still really like the native platforms, the indigenous platforms. I mean, it's the most fun. It's where you're kind of free to play without like Xamarin costs money. You can get these tools for free. There's so much more books and things. Professional authors are writing books for native Android and iOS. But these are skills you need to have to be a Xamarin developer in the first place. So you can't really kind of like turn your back on those stacks. You kind of have to be in it. On the website, that's where I kind of feel like you kind of don't make a decision, because there are only so many hours. As one person, I made a very definite decision that I was going to focus on mobile and everything mobile, because it's not all about Swift or Objective-C statements. It's like how do you work how do you do mobile? How do you manage batteries? How do you work with sensors? How do you work with geolocation? I mean, it's kind of similar concepts in both, but it's different. But there's a lot more similar between the two than there are difference. You have to kind of translate experiences. Like customers who want both, want them to kind of behave similarly, and you've got to kind of learn both and learn how to translate it. But the web, I don't have time for web. I'm afraid that's not to say I don't have time for web, but other people in my company used to talk about it. So.
Wow. Thank you very much.
That is me.
Team Native, same question?
Yeah, so I do, today, for example, I did Ruby on Rails this morning, patching an Android app, worked some Elixir code for Phoenix in the back end, and also worked on an Ember JavaScript app. So I just bounced it all around it, and I found it helped me a lot because at the end of the day, it's your computers. They all work relatively similarly, and we're getting to a stage where everything you do in the browser and everything you do on phone are a lot of the same concepts apply. You're moving data over wire, and most of your business logic should live in the back end. So as long as you try and keep your client-side stuff as simple as possible to the UI speed of the view layer, and then get the data to that view layer, you don't have to juggle absolutely everything around, and you have room in your brain to stuff multiple platforms in, I feel.
That's fair. So Team Xamarin, I guess, I haven't dabbled a ton in .NET and C#. I've seen it and ran streaming as quickly as I could.
You're from an Objective-C background?
Yeah. And I think, part of it is that
Lack of square bracket.
I mean, and part of it's, that it costs $1,000 to get started on something like that. And that's tough for me, especially when I was just starting. In terms of web, I dabbled in web. I like to think it's a hobby, but it's certainly not my profession. I try to be good at one thing, but I think we can all agree CSS is the best of the others. Sorry, it's a terrible slide. Yeah, I tend to stay away from web unless I'm doing something for myself like this. That's fair.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Mobile web, same question.
Yeah, so with iOS and Android, I've spent a little bit of time using on my originally learned Java, but that was a classroom setting. So since then, the bulk of my experience has been bugging a couple hackathon things at the Tango one, and using things like Unity and stuff like that compile to those platforms. So we'll exclude those. I don't know. I mean, I really probably haven't had enough experience to give it complete fair judgment, but I would say one of the big pain points of iOS is App Store and the price. It's no Xamarin, don't get me wrong, only being $100 and $25 for developer store, but compared to web where you can just kind of throw something up, it's a little bit different process when you have to have someone else say, yeah, let's go there. As far as Xamarin, I really don't have time for that.
Touche.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Next question, we're going to start with the native developers. Who knows some about the learning curve? How long it would take to just get off the ground, and then how long would it take to really know your platform?
Sure.
So somebody who teaches this, whenever I was teaching classes for existing programmers, we'd be able to do a week boot camp, and by Friday they would be discovering things in Android that I didn't know. Now that was at Google's and Uber and Microsoft's top tier developers. But yeah, a very experienced developer who knows the language of Java very well, you can get up and running in a week and pick that up. From there, it's just pulling the docs. If you're going to be using the GPS that day, you go pull up the GPS page. Play services, you go try and decipher the unfortunate documents that are Google Play Source documents. So that's really easy to learn for existing developers. Now, if you are just like a JavaScript, HTML, CSS front-end guy and want to learn mobile, you're going to have a double learning curve because you're going to have to learn probably a new language, likely your first object-oriented language, and then all this framework stuff on top of it. There's definitely a step up in difficulty there, but it's not like an insurmountable challenge. And if you've been developing at all for years on end, you could probably in under a month start shipping on the App Store as a hobby project.
Yeah, I feel like that's about right. I mean, I think to take that a step further, like, most of the people we hire, or everyone we hire, has been an experienced programmer, and they're able to pick up, and do moderately well on the platform and around the month. I think to really get to a level, where they're kind of a national of, is typically somewhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on how hard they're working on it and if they're reaching out like that, stuff like that. If they're passionate about it, absolutely helps. But, I think a lot of people look at, Objective-C and they see all these square brackets and they're like, oh, this is going to be horrible, I'll never learn that. It's just another program. A lot of us have Java in school, so that's not too bad to pick up. We're getting to a point in native development where you can't be an expert in everything. There are just too many frameworks out there to, have built several apps in every single one. And so, a lot of this is just getting so used to the framework, especially with iOS. There's kind of a way that Apple does stuff, and after a while, it sounds silly because we're programmers, but it almost comes from the gut. It's this intuitive knowing of, how to get something done. And I think something like that takes quite a lot to develop. But yeah, I think you can get up to speed pretty quickly and become a fairly successful guy.
Yeah, it's like probably 3 months before you start to learn the question and the docs reference, which is what you should be doing.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Webs, any question about the learning curve of your platform?
Yeah, I think there's kind of different stages of it, and since this is concentrating on mobile apps, I would say I'm going to talk about the learning curve to get to the point where you're running a full application, not something that's just a static web page, because that probably only takes about a couple of weeks. If you're good at programming languages, it'll only be a couple of weeks to a month, and you can get a pretty good static web page going. So for full-on web apps, I would say 3 to 6 months to do it in a healthy manner. I would say 3 to 6 months because it's first getting the just mobile web or web in general down and the nuances around that and understanding like MVC framework or anything like that is a whole nother 3 months. Yeah, that's about it.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Tim Zamarin?
I think it's kind of a similar story to the guys at the end of the table. If you're a .NET developer already, that's kind of handy because you can leverage the same language across both platforms. You can use Visual Studio or Xamarin Studio if you want for both. But really, it's learning how to be a mobile developer and the frameworks that you're building upon. Xamarin has some nice stuff there. Xamarin University, which you pay to access. I mean, to be clear, Xamarin's not trying to compete with free products. Their target is very much enterprise and businesses, which I think is at odds with their kind of heritage of open source friendliness and things like that. But that really is who they're targeting, and that's where that's where hordes of .NET developers live, is in enterprises and in big business. So they offer a training, Xamarin University, where they have professional trainers who work with small batch classes of real humans, like 30 people to a class, and you can ask questions, have office hours, and things like that. So if you're trying to level up a team for a business, that's a really good product to invest in. They have reference apps, the kinds of apps that a business might want to produce, to download and check out the architectures of the apps. That's one of the things you kind of think hard about on a Xamarin app is, I get to reuse a lot of code, business logic and plumbing code and models and things like that. But then I have to write the UI for each platform. So how do I structure my projects optimally? That's something you don't really want to learn that yourself. You'd rather learn the best practice and use it. So they do a lot of work there to kind of teach that type of stuff. But it's gonna, like Wally said, you don't stop learning on mobile. New frameworks are coming out all the time. Like your first app may not use much, so you may get to complete it, then the next one uses a whole bunch of sensors that you've never touched before, so you're back to the drawing board. But yeah, so it's pretty similar.
Very nice. Thank you very much. All right. Next question will start with the web team. And is there anything about these other two platforms that you envy, that you really wish that you would find a word about?
I would say specifically iOS on the indigenous native. I think the ability to know exactly what you're developing for, exactly what things are going to be between hardware and screen size and things like that is a pretty cool thing. So I do envy that. With all of them, access to sensors. I mean, right now we're on the web. It's dictated by what the native guys want to allow. So with Android, they're a little bit more invested, so they're allowing us to do those things. But the unhindered access to those things is pretty great. I wish I had that. Xamarin. The open environment and the fragmentation of the other platforms is a good thing in many cases, but having that enterprise support, having the closed world has its advantages as well. And also being able to tap into the large pool of .NET developers, kind of bringing that to the mobile environment is something. So.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Team Xamarin?
When it comes to web, I love the speed of deployment and the speed of fixing a bug. You can't really beat that. Love it. Very envious. On the indigenous side, when you get a bug on Xamarin, you're like the confidence to know it's not Xamarin doing the bug. If you're just doing, what is the tool now? Android Studio? Is that right? Android Studio, or you're in Xcode. You're as close as you can get.
Your stack trace occur.
Yeah. I don't miss the debugging experience in Xcode. I'd much rather have the debugging experience. But yeah, I miss that. There are, sometimes Android leaks its abstraction a little bit, and it's just nice to be closer to the metal and to feel like you can, squeeze every bit of performance out of your app if you need to. You can really go close. Like I said earlier, SDKs. We're doing the envy. Something we like. What's the question again?
Envy.
Yeah. The SDKs, just grabbing SDK and plugging it in and using it rather than to think about finding as a hassle. And the size of the communities, Cocoa Pods, that kind of thing.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Team Nate, same question?
Sure. I gotta say for Team Xamarin, I'm envious of your ID. Xcode is great, but it's always some beta version running for half a year, and that's just keep happening more times it's going to crash on me or run a technical machine. Android Studio is better, but still not great. You're in Eclipse before that. So that's cool a lot. You know, I'm also kind of envious that you have kind of a single source of truth for what the business logic that lives on the outside. I think there's a real advantage to that, especially if you're doing some complex and novel processing. That's really handy to have. And yeah, on the website, I guess, you know, a couple things like Ben mentioned, like, you know, being able to deploy immediately and know exactly what version of your app people are running is really nice. Right? You don't have to worry about someone like
You can't take that for granted, can you, until it's gone?
yeah. So that would be wonderful. And not having to go through outdoor review, you know, Apple tends to like to make things semi-political, whether you believe that's a good thing or not is up to you, but there are definitely certain types of apps that just wouldn't ever be allowed on the App Store. And so having a way to openly distribute whatever you feel like distributing is really powerful, in my opinion. What else do I have? I guess that's all I've got. I mean, for the website too, like there are just a ton more resources out there for learning. You know, even far and above what you can get for initiatives native.
Yeah. Yeah, the main thing that I need is actually just the pool of developers. For .NET, you have, I don't know, in the crannies of every gigantic project, I don't know how many .NET developers there are, but there's tons of them hiding in there. And then web, everybody these days seems to know web, or at least wants to learn web. And so just having a gigantic pool of experienced senior level developers, whereas Android senior developers are all work for Google or Square, I think. And then I do miss some of the tooling around testing, automated testing from web, mobile web, or just web in general, where you can just have a script that pops open and runs spam.js and simulates the browser and runs it whatever screen sizes you want. And that just works, whereas if you want to test on Android, you need to go have a device farm. If you want to do it right and have pay Amazon $200 a month per phone, apparently, and have them run your app whenever you deploy it. And just, yeah, being able to just deploy to the web, and it's going to work right. Except right now, Internet Explorer is dead most of it.
I can plug in. Xamarin has a thing. This is not to do with mobile development at all, but any native app, they have a thing called Test Cloud, where you can upload your APK and a script against it and run against
and that's something where a lot of this stuff is changing right now. Is there's a ton of Android options popping up. Amazon thing popped up where everybody realized, wait, we now need testing, we need tooling around our mobile apps.
Very good. Thank you very much. In Xamarin, this one will start with you. Now's your chance. Why do you think your platform is superior? What's better about it?
I mean, you know, Xamarin is kind of pitched that, you know, it has its blue ocean, it has a niche that it's going after. It's going after, you know, companies that have made a deep investment in .NET, right? You're a development manager. You got a lot of .NET developers. You don't have any iOS. You don't have any Java. You know, what are you gonna? That's a. You know, what are you gonna do to take on mobile? You know, that's where Xamarin's sweet spot is. You know, they're. You know, also cross-platform. You know, in those environments, you get a lot of BYOD kind of scenarios. Bring your own device. And you know, you pretty much want to tackle both. Xamarin is, you know, can produce first-class experiences, but I really think it has a sweet spot in companies that are building a ton of internal product. For, you know, imagine a large healthcare company where they want to go mobile first, and they want to rapidly produce tooling, you know, across the board, a whole variety of things. You know, this isn't the style of app that Apple would love, where they want to, you know, delight users and blow people's socks off and, you know, that kind of stuff. It's more of a, you know, we've got a lot of problems to solve and we want to do it efficient. But that's an environment where it can thrive. What else? I mean, that's really Xamarin's sweet spot, I think. You know, I wouldn't suggest anybody who knows iOS go learn Xamarin just to get cross-platform. I think that's kind of a tougher sell. The sweet spot is definitely for business, for people who already know C# and .NET. And the other thing is, like, you don't get it for free. You've got to dedicate a lot of resources to learning mobile development, period, but you've got a leg up, I think, at that point, and a lot of support from Xamarin. So I think that's really the sweet spot. But you don't, like other hybrid solutions, you're not losing performance once you've made the investment. The apps you're producing are really good, fast, but I think we want to kid ourselves that the typical corporate developer, like I have been, you don't have the time to make pixel perfect. You don't want to make Spotify. This is just not the business case for it. You have to make apps quickly, ship them, support them, and make money for your business. So I think that's where it's really sweet, especially on the internal side of things.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Team Native?
Well, I guess we were down on the stack. Everybody else has to run on our stuff at some point in time, so we can always ship features first and be on the cutting edge. So we were really cutting edge, load of hardware, can do crazy things with sensors or the screen or whatever device it is without having to wait on somebody else. Also, I actually like being able to ship C code in my app if I need to. If I can go find a machine learning library out there, I can drop that in and use it, and I can actually use it on both Android and iOS. And just being close to an actual CPU versus running on virtual machine turtles all the way down. No turtles.
And I guess to kind of compare that, like, I think, we have to remember that these are not supercomputers, right? They're embedded systems. They have batteries. They have, limited amounts of data, and they have, processors that aren't ridiculously fast. So I think, being that close to the metal and being able to optimize to that level is really handy. And maybe it's more for consumer-facing apps. I think consumers these days are looking for a very, very polished app experience, and they're going to get bored with your app, no matter how well it works, if it doesn't delight them. And this is a big thing that Apple's been pushing, but I think just the ease of kind of adding that extra layer of polish onto a native app is much easier when you're dealing with the kind of native SDKs at the base there. Apple makes it ridiculously easy to add animation and do it as well. I think, in terms of local web, like, there are a ton of reasons I think, doing a native app is better. But in certain cases, right, everything has its own case. But, talking about taking advantage of backgrounding, right, like running your app in the background, or having more than 5 megabytes for your SQL data store, for offline caching, or doing multi-touch of any kind. These are big native paradigms that you kind of can't live without if you're going to have a truly native experience.
Offline is one area where it absolutely helps a ton to be using the native platform. That you have access to SQLite, or the file systems, so you can really do whatever you want. And you don't have to rely on loading CSS from the web or kind of dimming the browser and being okay with no internet.
Yeah, and I think another thing is kind of the phrases forwards compatibility, if that's a term. Apple just released Bitcode, which basically kind of like bytecode, and they can recompile it for whatever architecture comes up next. So if they move away from ARM, you're not scrambling trying to get your app recompiled to go run on those new devices. It's just going to work. Personally, I feel like an ARM Mac isn't too far away, and when they open that up and say, here's the App Store for Mac, it's great that any app is already invested in or written is just going to run it. And on the Android side, I guess there's some of that too, right?
Yeah, ARM can now run APKs on Chromebook, for example, and your desktop too.
Very good. Thank you very much. Mobile web?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things that make mobile web great. One of the big ones being kind of the democratization. Native Xamarin, they're all dependent on particular companies to dictate confines of it, and while mobile web has that it's all of them together to lean on standard. And it moves at a slower pace for the things I talked about before, like the ability to save large amounts. My current line background that's only available on Android right now. But once that becomes a certain point, then it'll be available on all devices. It'll be a uniform system that everyone can use. You don't have to develop twice. You don't have to tweak twice. You just make it as is. You're able to do it on desktop using a fancy Google laptop to run your app on desktop. But I think one of the biggest things that I mentioned before was the scalability. So, so the user, you're not going to download an app for every single thing you have. It has more and more things like the restaurant, that sort. They don't want to spend $80,000, $100,000 to just get their menu out there and get the loyalty program in. You can do that with mobile web easily, cheaply, and efficiently. You can update quickly. It's a completely democratized system. There's no wall burden to it, or if there is, the garden is seized by everyone. So, yeah. That's why I think that mobile web is the way to go.
Awesome. Thank you very much. This question will start with native. And earlier we had some a little bit of some blood out. Saying, I don't have time to learn mobile, and we're talking about I don't have time to learn Xamarin. So what would it take for you to invest more time into these others?
Well, I have no need to learn Xamarin because if I'm going to learn something new, it's going to just be iOS. I'll just learn it once and be done with it. I already mobile web, I know enough of. I can do it if I need it. So yeah, no, I guess I'm not learning this. So it's not going to work.
What would it take to learn Xamarin?
Or mobile web, or
Sure. I mean, I think
What would it take to make that your chosen platform?
I appreciate it.
Oh, to switch?
yeah.
Wow. What would it take to switch?
Microsoft bribed me enough, which they tend to use.
Yeah, I mean, I've been jealous of Visual Studio for years now. I think if this new Forms thing actually turns out to be what it looks like it's going to be, like that's interesting.
Yeah, give it a while.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty appealing. What would it take to switch to mobile web? It's just a totally different trajectory for me, I guess. Like I built web apps, I think I said earlier I'm doing web, that's not true. Like, PHP is all some stuff in Rails, some a little bit in Node, but I don't think with my background, maybe being focused on embedded systems, that I would be super interested in switching to mobile web.
Yeah, I actually do remember there was that time where Microsoft was paying like $1,000 just for shipping anything on the Windows App Store. So if I'm doing that again, where it's like $1,000 for shipping a card app on Windows Phone, I'm not right.
They really did cold cash, $1,000.
Yeah, so it's either 500,000. It was something Windows Phone was brand new. It was literally a price.
Oh, wait, Windows Phone was brand new.
Windows Phone, yeah, or Windows Phone OS.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have any Windows Phone representation here. I kind of consider it a cry for help myself.
I can talk about Windows Phone.
This is the mobile development user group. They have a place here.
We wrote Travelocity's app for the Windows Phone launch.
We might as well pin up BlackBerry too.
Yes. Yes. People need buttons, okay?
Mobile web. The question.
I think with Xamarin, the paywall was main for me. I like tinkering a lot before getting into something, and $1,000 paywall is pretty.
I don't know how much it is. I don't know if it's that much paying anything when there's so much other quality learning to do if you're doing it for the passion.
Yeah. It's a completely switch. I like Visual Studio. It's one of the very quality of .NET, but yeah, that's about it on that end. With native, I think the biggest indigenous native think the biggest thing is the access over walls.
Android doesn't really have one. You just ship an APK.
I got one rejected once. So.
Really? What the hell are you doing?
It was a hackathon. I rejected a one-day-old app, so naming things. Didn't take Google's name off the sample. So, so things like that. Like I want to be able to ship an exact replica of Google and not have to at least like give this order. No, I think that those walls. While the Play Store is a lot more open, they still have a wall, and I think that wall infringes on some of the bleeding edge stuff that people can do, thought and technology wise. So I think that's the big thing. The other thing is compatibility. I hate that you have to develop for both separately. If it was all just Android or all just iOS, then I would be for that a lot more. But the fact that you're recreating things, no one likes to recreate. So that's a big change. Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Thank you very much. Team Xamarin?
What was the question?
What would it take you to spend more time in the other disciplines?
More free time?
Sure. What professionally? What would it take professionally to be like, forget this, you want all in?
Make it less ambiguous. What would it take to make you a pure mobile web developer?
For the experience to be better. I mean, honestly, that's not slam or anything. I mean, I know there are advantages to be able to deploy immediately and get people using it, but for the purposes that we have, you know, the experience just isn't quite there. Like the power of like touch and speed and sensors and things like that, it would just need to be more robust. And might get there eventually, but I feel like it's always going to lag a bit, right? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing incentivizing, or especially Apple, to make it more friendly. I mean, Google's always going to be the friend of the web, so they may make it more friendly. But nothing on the iOS stack is going to make that happen. So they did with ad blocking recently and things like that. You know, we don't love the web. And you know, I like iOS and Android development. If I had more time, I'd like to spend more time. I haven't done any Swift personally. I'd love to dig into Swift. And professionally, though, so I think the performance of mobile web is challenging. I think the investment you make in your stack. If you ever reached a point where you might say, let's start again, throw it all away, then maybe. But I think the grass is always greener on the other side. You kind of get fixated on the problems that your stack has, and you kind of curse it a lot. But there's also good things. So I think you have to kind of stay the course a little bit, and you've made an investment. So but I love iOS and Android development. I think if I had independently wealthy and didn't have to work, I might like to learn the zen of those platforms a little bit more and learn how to do them like proper right, just for the challenge of it. But there's other programming stuff out there too that's not mobile, right? Like functional programming and things like that. Like that's cool too. That has nothing to do with front end development.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right, for this round, we are going to take some of our community asked supply questions, and we have one unique question for each of you. So we will start with mobile web. And the question submitted was, how do you handle or narrow the performance gap between native and web apps?
Handling it is handler narrow. Okay, so looking into some of these bleeding edge things that like service worker and like these other service APIs. and incorporating those into your web app helps pressure the other platforms to come up to speed. So narrowing in that sense, that's how we do that. But just kind of rethinking it, so not having multi-touch and not having some of those things. It's kind of the same thing between thinking about the desktop web experience, mobile as it is web native. You're just retooling a few things. So just allowing things to be called in the background and moving on and displaying something else on the web page is one thing. Adding utilizing what caching systems exist is a really big thing because you're making calls every time. If you make a call every time something changes, then it can get a bit daunting and it'd be a pretty bad experience if you have to wait for things to load. So, yeah.
Very good. Thank you very much. Team Xamarin, your question is, this is a community asked question, so we might have touched on it a little bit earlier tonight. What is the key benefit of hybrid development, Xamarin development versus mobile web? Is it also a benefit over native? Can you give me that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that Xamarin touts, and I've seen it, is code reuse, sharing. So you factor out as much as you can out of the controllers behind your UI. Factor that into shared code. Your service calls, your model, your data persistence. You can have a common abstraction of a SQL, Lite, or some other data store or the file system. You can you can put abstractions over sensors. So if there's common behavior, like over the GPS sensor, you can try to act upon that in a uniform way. So code reuse is a big thing. If you know .NET, if you've had years and years of investment honing your skills in .NET, although it's always fun to go learn a new language, it's super fun to do that. You don't have to, if you're leveraging it for business, you have a ton of .NET developers. One of the things that's quite cool is, if you're doing a shared code, there's not a thing in there really that requires you to have mobile experience. So if you've got a team with two, you do kind of on the front end side, you kind of lean towards the platform. So you have kind of like an iOS leaning Xamarin developer, an Android leaning person. That middle tier, the shared code, anybody can write it. Yeah, so you've just got a really strong developer. You can bring them on the team and get them to write that piece. And then there's an ecosystem of .NET, Visual Studio, and the familiarity that you have there. So.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Team Native, your question is, when building a primarily native mobile app, what are some cases where using a web view for displaying UI might be appropriate?
The help files and FAQ.
Never.
But
Help files and FAQ.
if you have some stuff from some marketing team or something where they know HTML, CSS, and it's just a document, that's the one time when I use web views.
Time to service.
Service, all
Things that change need to be ridiculous. But even so, right? Like maybe the fact has questions about your features that are on an old device.
Yeah, and in that case, I just ship a web view with HTML and a sometimes. But
Trying to think like of other useful ways we've used web views, but
I don't use web views, but
I think from a solid experience, you can understand. I've seen some apps, maybe do like a raw authentication through a web view and static rewrite that, and calling it out to maybe some web APIs, maybe more appropriate to use.
if someone doesn't offer an OOP, OAuth endpoint, sometimes you just have to pop up on web, you have them log in, and then grab the key out of the URL and it redirects.
Yeah, it's tough though. I think, I can vary that stuff in the second screen where it's, like back-end stuff because it's a real break in the experience if you go creative, right? You're flying around through all these screens and all of a sudden like, well, here's a blank screen, it's better, yeah, than vegetables.
Very nice. Thank you very much. All right, this is my final round question. After this, we'll see if anyone in the audience has a question you want to ask, and then we'll give you a chance to have some closing statements. So, starting with Team Xamarin, I'd like to know about the employment prospects of the Xamarin programmer. What else you might need in that skill set?
The employment prospects.
How good are the jobs, man?
Say again?
How good are the jobs?
How good are the jobs?
And plentiful.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that because I'm not a recruiter or anything. But I mean,
You get contact from anyone?
oh yeah,
Well,
yeah. I used to get contact a lot of Firefly. Kindly tell people that you have a job and someone's paying me to answer this call. You know, the guy you're trying to steal me from. That's me as well. That happens to be me. I mean, I think they're pretty robust. I mean, Xamarin's doing well. I think they're going to be high-paying jobs, senior jobs, but I don't know. I honestly couldn't answer that. I mean, to what you would do during, in your day job, you're going to be working on mobile, which is freaking cool. Mobile's really cool. You're working in the .NET stack. If you don't like .NET, I wouldn't advise doing it. I would advise, doubling down if you really like .NET. Xamarin has the most kick-ass conference out there, so make sure you get your employer to let you go to Xamarin Evolve. If you're learning mobile from scratch, there are good training options, but it's a secure job. It's a good job. If you're talking to the guy who's now the product manager for mobile, who's kind of like not a developer anymore, so I guess I've kind of done that part of my career, and I enjoy the challenge of kind of envisioning the product and trying to bring it to market, and things like that. So I kind of like changed my emphasis a little bit. But I mean, it's totally robust, totally secure, totally all the things.
do you have a problem finding Xamarin resources?
Yeah, there aren't enough Xamarin resources. I think Kurt, you were saying there's a lot of experienced .NET guys out there, but there aren't a lot of experienced .NET mobile guys out there. So you are left with a bit of a challenge when you're trying to fill out your Xamarin team. Do I take a .NET guy and train them on iOS or Android, or do I take an iOS or Android guy and train them on .NET? We took the approach.
Or a web developer. Train on everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could do that. The most efficient approach we took was to take graduate students who worked on their colleges, iOS or Android apps, and bring them in, and teach them .NET. That's the approach we took. I could take a really, 20-year industry .NET guy who gets paid, 6 figures, and turn them into a mobile developer, but that didn't seem like the smartest way to do it. So we went the other route, hire out a school where people are keen and kind of like inherently mobile savvy, and then teach them .NET. That's the way we.
Sure. Very nice. Thank you very much. In native?
Yeah, recruiters are really annoying. I know, a month after I started at Iron Yard, I got a recruiter email that specifically said, "No, you've only been at Iron Yard a month, well, you really need Android developer." I'm like, "No, you're in one of your companies, go away." But yeah, no, I feel like Android and Android especially right now, we need instructors for Android and iOS, by the way, in Nashville and other cities, and we can't find them. They all have jobs, they're all happy. We actually accidentally, before I knew him, we tried to recruit him. And he's like, "Sorry, I'm happy."
I have my own company, so seriously, this guy's saying
No, they're very processed.
I think the prospects are wonderful right now. Mobile development's interesting because it's really only been around in its current form for 6-7 years. So,
if you've been doing mobile for 6 or 7 years, you are.
So if you got in on the ground floor, that's really exciting for those people. Then the jobs are relatively high paying, I think, for programmers. I think there is a scarcity out there. And I think to Ben's point, like, there's really something to finding people who are super passionate about this and maybe industry veterans aren't the best suited because they, maybe hard to justify their costs to totally learn something new versus having someone who's fresh and excited. But I think the job prospects are huge. I mean, I've been meaning forever to change my LinkedIn title because I'm listed as founder and lead developer of Lunar Weekend, and I get it up like once a week by pretty sizable companies, asking all the time, and that's some stupid humble brag, like honestly it's flattering, but it's, I know a ton of other guys who are the same boat, and I'm not really worried about finding them. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you very much. What?
Yeah, I think kind of across the board for developers, the prospects are pretty good, and specifically web, I think is seeing a great surge as the ability to have full-fledged web applications has come out. I tried to look up statistics. I guess
Physics is that?
no, this one is Bureau of Labor Statistics. So, but I mean, I came into this presentation with my introduction, so hey, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I came into this saying, if you're a mobile or a web developer in general, we're always looking down. So I'm part of that saying that that's a job.
Very nice.
We'll pay you more, maybe. Maybe. You're good.
All right. Before we move to the closing statement, wondering if the audience has any questions.
All due respect to the data team here, I'm wondering if anybody from this side has worked with any other tools than just Xamarin, say, Template Platform, PhoneGap, any of the other toolings that are out there that can substitute for Xamarin. Anybody have your familiarity or experience?
I would agree with him that like Xamarin's
It's a different
stack. It's its own piece. And it's
We looked at PhoneGap for Firefly. But we go to Code Stock every year, for regional conferences, and then you get, the sessions that you know nothing about. You go sample. I always go sample the PhoneGap ones, wondering like, are they there yet? Are they there yet? And every time I would look at them, I'm like, damn, they're not there yet. I just don't think that story's changed too much. It's and it's anecdotal. I know people that have tried PhoneGap, and they always end up redoing their projects just because the experience, the delight, the user delight, the experience is the barrier is really high. People expect it. That's one of the challenges I have had at Firefly, and you guys probably have. It's like people don't know how much it costs, how much effort it takes to do a really good experience. They think,
Oh, I have JavaScript. Let me just pick up PhoneGap.
I think
Yeah.
Well, they think, I want Uber. I had an idea for driving around delivery thing like Uber, but with these, but different. Like that's going to make it different. Like Uber, but different. And like, surely you can just get some components, right? Just the Uber template app, and then tweak it.
No Telerik though. I mean, nobody talked about that last year. They were
There was a Telerik guy who I had some beers with recently, who's like one of their MVPs or something like that, who lives in Nashville, and he was telling me how they've re-architected everything on Telerik. It's no longer crap, and now it's good. So I give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, you might want to. I think though that if you want to talk about Xamarin's, licensing structure, that was hideous before, like really abusive. They have changed it now, where it's more like Xamarin's, I think, where at least it kind of makes sense. But before they really put the screws to people who were big and used it like massively, so they're reinventing themselves some. But that was titanium I was talking about. Telluric is like another. It's just like another Cordova, right? Isn't it? It's built on Cordova Telluric.
So Telluric is a script, and it's similar-ish to kind of React Native.
Okay.
And that's even worse.
Yeah, and I tried out PhoneGap for a little bit, and it was almost like, rather than just having like a web application, you end up having to learn these languages to tweak it enough to make it work.
Yeah. And then your user opens your PhoneGap app and they think it's a native app, but it's really just a web browser. Yeah. You're in a web browser, they expect it to work.
Yeah.
But you get the benefits of a web browser,
Yeah.
right? Where you can deploy and fix bugs.
I think there's a great graph online that's like the amount of engineering effort that it takes to get to, as it complexity of the project increases.
Like the first 10% of the PhoneGap app, you're like, oh, this is the best thing ever. Yeah.
Native is kind of more linear. I can PhoneGap.
You actually
has a
have
lot
a
of things. You can't get anything better.
I'm really looking at a PhoneGap campaign. I personally, I would love to be the PhoneGap campaign. There is that 40% though that you just can't get.
It's good if you have
If I got you earlier, we got you right there.
I came like right. Yeah, a lot of those frameworks are good if you are truly a startup with maybe one developer who knows backend from front and back, and you need a prototype of mobile app, and you plan out from web. Like,
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I mean, there's certain types of apps that like Planet and all that stuff. I definitely kind of have that burden on being able to come for grade. I actually came from doing more like kind of native stuff as a hobby. I'm actually more of a designer. I want to do that. But yeah, we originally chose PhoneGap because it's kind of a limited budget and whatnot. But I feel like the makes them pretty good. And you know what's most we have to do yourself. But yeah, I think you make it designer implementations. But I mean, personally, I think it's fair. I've actually moved my hobby projects into PhoneGap and Angular because of how fast and different design. But that's just me.
I think with any of these platforms, it's like knowing the limitations and what you can exploit for good, But
The second year, both people had 2 colleagues, same app, unknown for it. I guess personally feel you would be able to tell the difference between one app and native.
Oh yeah, yeah. I hit the back button a bunch, and if it actually closes, it's native. If it ends up on a white screen or just pops up different screens, it's definitely PhoneGap in that case.
And just because we do this every day, like I don't know if an average user, like I don't know if for a fair population could judge that off of, but there are definitely some net giveaways. I think my team, we were looking at the Xamarin website today, and some of the UI paradigms and one of their example apps for iPad was just like, that doesn't look native. Like the search bar is off, like in a weird way, in a way that's like, picking a good font for your website is important because no one's going to say, and that's a great font. But they're going to notice subconsciously. I think there's really.
is that the platform's fault that someone picked a font that you don't like? I mean.
Oh no, sorry, I just used that as an example.
No, I mean, there's no. Yeah. I think like it's subjective.
Everything when it doesn't match the platform. Like an Android search box will look like this. An iOS search box will look
But
like this.
that's just because the person.
Right.
Do it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The other dead giveaway is just rotation. On Android, you can tell when things are weird. It's just weird sometimes when it's rotated.
All right, I think it's time to move to our 30-second wrap-up. We'll start with the indigenous first.
I want to know Paul's question. Can Paul ask his question?
Sure.
Really quick, we don't mind, but it's getting near 8 o'clock, and that's probably when people might need to go. So, you know, if you need to go, we understand, but we're just going to go a little bit over 8 o'clock. So go ahead.
So I'm asking marketing question. So one of the A/B testing, right? So it's one of the things that has an advantage of space, and I heard a little bit of talk about this. One person server side, using your actual app code a little bit higher. Really like to hear contrast between Xamarin and native as an advantage. Xamarin, other hybrid over native in terms of A/B testing.
I'm not aware of a single one. In fact, it might be a negative, like if you're using a platform like Urban Airship or something like that, that kind of can tailor and target like rich push notifications and handle the A/B for you. I mean, you've got to handle the SDK challenge and things like that. I can't think of an advantage.
Android is awesome because Google, they actually just rolled out to the Play Store, iIndustry, you can do a bunch of A/B testing type analytics with Google Analytics. You can now ship betas to a wider audience easier. People can sign
Well, you can do that.
Yeah, you can do that with Xamarin, yeah.
But
But
how much of A/B testing though?
yeah, there's an SDK, they ship them in the US, and you can use Xamarin for A/B testing.
iOS, like there are services out there like Optimizely, basically just a flag a web server somewhere that's like which custom I pick. The problem is your iteration time is really slow. It's going to take you 7 to 10 days to get through App Store reviews, so you've got to be really deliberate on setting up your test cases and knowing exactly what my test for the next 7 to 10 days is. And then you have to have your next step ready to get shipping, right? So yeah, that iteration can get a little.
I think A/B testing like of native experience is just really dodgy, right? Because Apple likes to review the apps that everyone's going to get.
Yeah,
You can put flags, to switch between different experiences for different populations, but I think it's kind of dodgy. I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, it's more of a product of the app stores than the code.
All right.
Thank you for letting Paul ask this question.
Closing statements?
Yeah, go Team Native. No, I think my personal passion, like with software development, is always something that someone can't stop smiling about while they're using. And I just personally believe that going full on native is the best way to have a chance at getting that very rare experience.
Yeah, if you want to make money or ship stuff fast for your profitable business, maybe Xamarin makes sense. But I just like enjoyment. Yeah, money and more about the enjoyable native experience.
Very nice. Bubble?
So I think with mobile yield, ease of access and accessibility to everyone, and democratization that you can't get with these native experiences. The downsides of that come as well. The upside is you're knowing that everyone can use this and that it can be accessed with ease. You don't need to encourage someone to download it. Again, with that statistic, 65% of people do not download an app a month. I think that's nothing to sneeze at. That's I think mobile web development is the way to go.
Sure. Thank you very much. Team Xamarin?
I think on the Xamarin side, I mean, to be really clear, everything you can do on the indigenous stacks you can do in Xamarin, but that's not the reason, but it does have a niche. You pay for it. It's .NET based. I mean, there's a very specific use case. I think, when it comes to like wherever you want to create something delightful that people love, that's more about you than the platform. I mean, why do you make a wonderful Xamarin iOS app? Because you already know iOS, and you could do the same on the Android side. I mean, some of it might be like, I hate Microsoft and .NET. You could pay me to do that, but that's not really good business case, or a good case for a business decision based around maintainability and sustainability and things like that. And that's what it comes down to for a lot of companies. I invest in a platform. I need to keep this thing alive for the long haul. I have a suite of products, and that's where Xamarin really makes sense and shines. And that's really what they're going after. And Xamarin is more than just, a language and a platform to build a mobile app. They're also building an ecosystem. They've got university, they've got insights, which is their kind of like analytics and bug reporting products. They've got Test Cloud for testing, and solving kind of the Android fragmentation problem for testing on, lots and lots of devices, including CI and things like that. So they've got their core product now. They're kind of like doing more than that. I wouldn't be surprised if they did more to help developers down the road too, where when you're using that platform, you get additional services as well. That's Xamarin. They're very much targeted towards business, and I really wish there was a better offering for learning and playing. Like, we run a Xamarin user group, and it's just a pain in the ass. I mean, it really limits our attendance for who can come and play with us when they have to buy licenses or use a dumbed down experience. So we're actually giving them feedback, working with them, to see if they can give us licenses to give people to play. But that's Xamarin. It's kind of a business thing. Makes a lot of sense. Lots of Microsoft stuff in there. But it's a good platform. It's legit.
Awesome. How about a hand for our panelists?